Okay, personality, right? Close your eyes and think about who you are. You have a distinctively dynamic and organized pattern of cognitions, feelings, or motivations and behaving that characterizes your personality. This essentially makes up who you are. On the other hand, your personality can also be defined by the perceptions of the people around you. Whatever the case may be on how we see ourselves or how others see us, each and every one of us has a unique personality that defines us. Psychologists have sought for explanations for our behaviors and developed many different theories in an attempt to understand who we are. Each theorist has a unique background, experiences, and a theoretical framework that shapes their efforts in designing their theory. Thus, each theory has its own particular definition of personality, along with the associated assumptions about the origination of personality and its development and operations. It just so happens you'll be exploring my personality today from 3 prominent schools of psychology through different perspectives. Welcome to Kristen's Personality. Our first school of psychology consists of the analytical and neo-analytical perspectives with analysis from Sigmund Freud. We go to our first psychologist, Freud, who is considered the father of modern psychology and psychoanalysis. He placed an emphasis on the need to look to the unconscious. Due to largely emphasized inner processes of these psychoanalytical theories, how others view Kristen will not be discussed using these theories. Instead, my thoughts will be voiced out loud. Who is Kristen Tran when analyzed by the analytical perspective? Freud assumes that our inner processes are divided into 3 parts, consisting of the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. A large factor that dictates how people are governed are the unconscious needs and its conflicts. This unconscious process operates on a deep level, so deep we are mostly unaware of it at all. Thus, these unconscious traumas or anxieties seek expression in various defensive or distorted ways and interfere with conscious and rational behavior. Freud used a method of free association to try to uncover these unconscious thoughts. Freud further explains that the mind can further be divided into the superego, ego, and id. These are locked in a constant battle with one another to compete for the limited psychic energy available. The psychic energy operates based on life and death instincts. The life instinct energy is described as the libido, or the motivation to satisfy thirst, sexual needs, and hunger. On the other hand, the death instinct consists of an aggressive energy whereby we set to destroy others or ourselves. It has both unconscious sexual and aggressive instincts and only seeks pleasure without rational thought. The ego acts as a control to keep the impulses of the id in check. The superego is a set of learned ideals, mostly from parental figures, which serves to let us know what is and is not appropriate. The superego interacts with the id by suppressing the urges of the id and interacts with the ego by persuading the ego to set morals and perfect goals. Altogether, the ego has to keep a delicate balance. However, anxiety arises unconsciously when there is a conflict between the id and superego. When this happens, ego unconsciously will activate defensive mechanisms to regain control. There are several different defensive mechanisms that can be used. For example, when I have to think about taking the MCAT and applying to medical schools after graduation, that is about as far as I will go. That's a thing. I don't think about these things at all. I use a suppression defensive mechanism to stop these anxiety-provoking thoughts so that I don't have to feel the heavy weight of what-ifs and possible failures. My mind is actively and unconsciously using this mechanism as a way to cope. On another example, perhaps a bit darker and a more vulnerable side of me feels insecure and jealous when I look at other people's pre-med journey. I don't feel as accomplished or I want to do the same things that the other person is. What consumes me is a deep-seated green envy that leaves a bitter feeling in my mouth. Instead of following what my id would want me to act, that is, sabotage the other person by leading them astray with the wrong information or refusing outright to help them, I channel that dark energy into volunteering at the hospital, working in the lab, and studying to maintain my grades. That is a displacement defense mechanism whereby my unacceptable impulses are displaced into more socially acceptable ones. By doing so, I don't act on my id impulses since it will not really help me in the long run, besides releasing some of that energy but feeling bad afterwards. Instead, I'm improving on my own medical school application with those enhancing experiences and not worrying about how my story compares to others. Freud goes on to further postulate that these constructs come together in the theory of psychosexual development. Libido energy is channeled through a variety of stages to an ultimate final stage, and normal development occurs when an individual is able to successfully maneuver the energy through all the stages. Otherwise, fixation occurs when a person is unable to move that libido into the next stage, and they are essentially stuck in that stage. This makes the person more prone to a crisis later in life and use defense mechanisms excessively to alleviate the accompanying anxiety. For each stage where the conflict occurs, Freud has an associated adult character pattern of descriptions. The psychosexual development stages are as follows: first oral, anal, followed by phallic, latency, and lastly the genital. Each stage has a different corresponding body part where the libido energy is focused. When analyzing myself, it seems as if I have an anal character, especially in regard to orderliness. This is because when I was younger, I definitely had difficulties toilet training. While these difficulties are not necessarily due to a power struggle between my parents and their demands, and may be more physical due to a disease such as constipation, Freud would theorize that my need for perfection and a dedication to precision and meticulous work would be due to my anal character. Oftentimes, I would procrastinate a project, such as this one, until the very last minute because I had to start it perfectly or I needed to have the right environment to work in. This is a detrimental conflict, especially when a perfect start or environment does not always exist, and I would be at risk of not finishing my work or even worse, not achieving the goals I set out for myself because I'm always stuck waiting for flawlessness. This could be also why I use the suppression and displacement defense mechanisms as a way to relieve my anxieties. I would have to resolve this libido energy from the anal stage to prevent these conflicts. While I may be able to still develop normally in other areas and make satisfactory adjustments to attain success in love and work, I would still encounter some problems due to the suspended libido energy. Freud would suggest me to free associate to uncover the traumatic experiences I may have forgotten about in my childhood to correct and free my fixation from the anal stage. He may also try to analyze my dreams for a latent or hidden meaning for an explanation. In summary, these would be some of the things that Freud remarks about my personality. Due to the limited time available, unfortunately, the Neo-Analytical Perspective would not be discussed in this project. However, the Neo-Analytical Perspective modifies or builds upon Freud's original theory due to some disagreement. For example, Karen Horney rejected the concept of penis envy and came up with womb envy instead. However, similarly, the Neo-Analytical approach still relies heavily on inner processes. Rather than emphasize the cognitive or inner unconscious processes, behaviorists set out to observe measurable behaviors through different scientific experiments. The psychologists from the Behavioral School of Psychology postulate that personality is learned and acquired through our environment, rather than biologically set as other schools of psychology theorize. The way we behave is a result of the punishments or reinforcements according to B.F. Skinner and through modeling as Bandera studies. B.F. Skinner explains in his theory that mentalism is the reason why we are unable to better understand our behaviors. Mentalism is the idea that we provide comforting explanations to describe behaviors instead of actually searching for a clear and precise antecedent environmental event that caused the behavior. Skinner completely rejected mentalism and instead focuses on the past or current environment that directly affects and causes behaviors, along with some associated genetic components as necessary. While Skinner acknowledged we had some unexplainable inner processes unrelated to the environment that affects our behavior, Skinner nonetheless did not use this in his theory because these inner explanations are hard to directly measure and determine causation on behavior. Skinner was set on direct observations of responses with clear causations based on different stimuli. In doing so, Skinner implied that most of our actions are determined by the environment and free will does not exist. With these basics forming his foundation, Skinner establishes what is known as operant conditioning. A stimulated behavior has its consequences, and these consequences, good or bad, will increase or decrease the occurrence of this behavior. It is worth noting that three important terms of contingency have to be met. That is, a consequence only happens after behavior, the consequence is a direct result from that specific behavior, and a certain consequence or stimulus can be associated to many different behaviors or generalization. Reinforcements serve to increase the occurrence of a behavior, while punishments decrease the frequency of a behavior. Positive reinforcements or positive punishments are added stimuli. Positive does not have to be necessarily good in this case. For example, a positive punishment for speeding is the fine. The fine is added to prevent speeding in the future. On the other hand, negative reinforcements or negative punishments are removed stimuli. Negative does not have to be bad either. For example, a negative reinforcement is taking away the chores as long as a kid gets all A's. The removal of chores acts to increase the chances that the kid gets good grades. Through Skinner's research, punishments should be used as a last resource to modify behavior. Punishments may cause aversive emotional responses associated with the behavior and only temporarily reduce behaviors. Instead, Skinner strongly encouraged reinforcement strategies to encourage and change behaviors. There are 4 different types of schedule or arrangements of reinforcements that can be used. In a fixed ratio arrangement, after a certain number of behaviors, a reinforcement is applied. On the other hand, in a variable ratio schedule, a reinforcement is applied after a random number of behaviors. When it comes to interval schedules, the number is replaced by a measurement of time. Skinner found that a continuous reinforcement schedule, which rewarded behavior each time with a reinforcement, produces higher rates of response. In an intermittent reinforcement schedule, behavior is rewarded randomly. Due to the variable reinforcements, extinction of a behavior is much harder. Extinction is when a behavior is reduced until it no longer occurs due to a failure to provide a reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. However, because there is no set amount of time or number before reinforcement is set to come, people maintain these behaviors for longer, as the next number or more time might reinforce this behavior. This is what makes gambling so addicting. Bandura adds to Skinner's theory by supposing that our behaviors are a complex interplay of inner processes and environmental influences. We use higher mental processes or verbal representation and imagination to make insightful and foresightful decisions regarding our behavior. Thus, our behavior is not solely controlled by only the environment, and cognitive processes are also involved. Bandura also further postulates that a lot of learning is acquired through observational learning, or modeling. We observe a model's behavior and imitate that model. This considerably shortens the learning process, and we can avoid lethal or detrimental consequences because we do not have to be directly exposed to the consequences. Instead, we learn what not to do from the modeling and can adjust accordingly. There are several factors that might influence whether or not we imitate the model, including whether we perceive the model to be more similar to us and competent, as well as the reinforcements the model received for the modeled behavior. Skinner would analyze that Kristen is the epitome of operant conditioning. As his theory does not rely on her inner thoughts and processes, my own inner thoughts will not be talked about. Skinner would explain that Kristen's behaviors during high grades is driven by the positive reinforcements she receives, such as the shopping she rewards herself to, or the opportunities afforded to her based on her grades. Since she is a lot older now and has developed a habit of this behavior, she does not have to be continuously reinforced. Instead, her reinforcements come variably and after a random amount of time has passed. Otherwise, when Kristen was younger and her mother was developing this habit, she used a combination of reinforcements and punishments. Kristen was rewarded with a book or her favorite drink, Coca-Cola, right after she did well on a test. By continuously rewarding Kristen, her mother was trying to encourage this behavior to occur more often. However, when Kristen got in trouble at school for talking too much or received a low grade on a test, her mother would positively punish her. This often came in the form of spankings and strong criticism immediately when Kristen came home from school in an attempt to reprimand the behavior. Since this did not outright solve that problem behavior, when Kristen still continued to get in trouble in school, her mother tried a different strategy. She banned Kristen from reading her favorite books for a week. This is a negative punishment because Kristen's favorite books were taken away so that Kristen would decrease her problem behaviors at school. All this for talking too much and having to sit at the silent lunch table a couple times. However, perhaps an unintended side effect from these behaviors is now that Kristen is older, she still does not speak up or talk in class anymore. Her aversion to the punishment her mother used caused her to no longer talk in class, but also even when discussion is warranted. This is why Skinner discourages the use of punishment strategies when possible. If this became problematic for Kristen in the long run, Skinner would use reinforcements to try to change this behavior. He would implement continuous reinforcements. Each time Kristen spoke up in class, he would give her bonus points, a positive reinforcement, or let her leave early from class, a negative reinforcement, immediately following the behavior. This would slowly encourage Kristen to talk more in class without the unintended associated negative emotional responses. As Kristen would begin to talk more, he might move to a fixed ratio arrangement, where every 10 times Kristen speaks up in class, he will reinforce her behavior. When speaking up in class is more natural and almost habitual, Skinner would move towards a variable ratio schedule where Kristen is randomly reinforced for her behavior after a random number of times. Skinner would be careful not to move too quickly towards this variable ratio schedule until the behavior has stuck, because extinction of this wanted behavior could occur. When Kristen realizes she no longer receives rewards for her behaviors, Kristen may stop. However, by using a variable ratio schedule, Kristen will keep on participating in class discussions because the next time she may speak up may be the time that she gets reinforced. This is why the variable ratio schedule is one of the root causes for addicting behaviors. Individuals will keep on trying and trying because the next time may be the time they get rewarded. Skinner would encourage Kristen to apply these same concepts to the behaviors that she wants to increase, such as cooking and working out more often. This could also work on the behaviors that Kristen wants to decrease, such as procrastination or snoozing in bed. Each time Kristen does not procrastinate or sleep in, she will get rewarded. The same concept applies. Bandura would analyze Kristen's behaviors and realize that her driving skills were acquired by watching her dad. In her eyes, Kristen sees her dad as a competent driver since he is a professional truck driver in charge of 18-wheelers. Because she thinks that her dad is an appropriate model, she imitates his driving. Ever since Kristen was a small child, when she wasn't sleeping in the car, she was watching her dad move his feet between the pedals. He would grip the steering wheel a certain way. Once Kristen had the opportunity to drive herself, she found herself also modeling the way her dad moves his feet between the pedals and holding the steering wheel in the same way. This is why Kristen learned how to drive so quickly. She had plenty of years to observe. In addition, since Bandura incorporated inner processes into his behavioral theory, he would consider what Kristen is thinking. Kristen watches her dad drive and mentally takes notes on what to do when she's driving herself. However, when her dad drives too fast or runs a red light and receives a ticket with a fine, Kristen learns not to imitate those behaviors due to the positive punishments associated. In my mind, I have imagined myself in that situation and would not like to receive a ticket as well as a scolding from my parents because I know that would be the consequences. Thus, using the behavioral theory, personality is shaped by solely the environment, as Skinner postulates, or a combination of the environment and cognitions, as Bandura adds. Kristen's behaviors and personality are a result from her environment. The Humanistic Psychologists are known as the third force movement in contemporary psychology, where the focus is shifted to the idea that our optimal psychological health and realization of our potentials can be reached so long as we are supported. This growth process is known as self-actualization, as Abraham Maslow describes it. The humanistic view is a lot more optimistic about personality and argues that the individuals are inherently good, creative, and happy so long as the environmental conditions are right. In doing so, humanistic psychologists emphasize a benevolent and helpful attitude which helps people realize their potential to grow and prosper. Abraham Maslow is credited for the traction of the movement, though other prominent psychologists like Jung, Adler, Horney, Kohut, and Allport, to name a few, also hinted on some of the core concepts of the humanistic movement in their writings and theories. In many of the analytical, neo-analytical, and even behaviorist theories, the topics of love, creativity, spontaneity, joy, courage, humor, independence, and personal growth are rarely paid attention to, though these are core contracts in our daily life. In contrast to the limited and pessimistic picture drawn about us through their lenses, we can see ourselves as good and on our way to our best selves with a humanistic perspective. Who is Kristen Tran when analyzed by Maslow's theory? Maslow's theories build upon the limitations of the Freudian personality theory, which mostly focuses on the unconscious. Instead, Maslow created a theory that reflects our needs and growth urges and structured them into a hierarchy. This emphasizes the rational and conscious forces controlling our personality. Maslow assumes that we have two basic sets of needs, the basic or deficiency needs and the growth or being needs. The basic needs are arranged into a hierarchy depending on how necessary they are for our survival, though these needs and their importance can vary from person to person. Once these basic needs are met, we can pursue the higher, though not necessarily hierarchical, growth needs in order to move towards self-actualization. At the bottom of the hierarchy, which is the most powerful driving force, is our physiological needs. These include hunger, thirst, and sex. Our physiological needs are the most important because without the satisfaction of these needs, it is hard to think and worry about safety, love, belongingness, esteem, and self-actualization. Individuals will continue to pursue these needs until they are met. Once these physiological needs are met, then comes our safety needs, which include security, structure, law, order, and freedom from chaos. In children, this manifests as a need for routine and familiar situations. For adults, we seek security in jobs with tenure, insurances to cover for ailments or accidents, and largely, a society that is stable enough to provide adequate housing and food without social turmoil. It is seen that during the current pandemic, these basic needs are not being met for many people, though they may have had these basic needs fulfilled in the past. This is a major setback towards moving towards self-actualization, though the effects of these deficiencies are unknown. It is still too early, as we are still living through the uncertainty, to tell. In the case that our physiological and safety needs are met, we are able to focus on the needs for belongingness and love. We all want to feel wanted and loved by others, a deficiency type of love that is selfish and only concerned with the receiving side of the stick. And the final part of the basic needs is esteem. We seek to maintain our own self-esteem, that is, our own respect for our competence and accomplishments, and esteem based on others' approval and recognitions. Once all these basic needs are met, the process of moving towards self-actualization can be worked upon. It is important to note that we may never reach the final stage of self-actualization, though we are always striving towards it. At this stage, we are concerned with gratifying our innate curiosity about the world around us and realize our best potential in order to achieve our goals and purposes. We are able to move towards a being love where we give back or pass on the love that we have received. Maslow notes that actualization depends on a good and supporting environment. The environment should be one full of trust, respect, and equality so that an individual feels confident in their abilities to work towards their potential. In doing so, people may experience what Maslow describes as flow or peak experience. In this state, people are in a zone of wonder, awe, and appreciation for the world around them. This is also known as B-cognition, whereby judgment is completely suspended. However, people are not always stuck in a state of peak experiences or B-cognition. Instead, there is a delicate balance towards self-actualization between B-cognition and D-cognition. D-cognition describes judgment and approval or disapproval of situations. Thus, the process of self-actualization involves uncertainty, conflict, and struggle, but also bliss and pleasure. When Maslow set after to find self-actualizing characteristics of the closest people he thought were self-actualizers, he finds that these self-actualizers had a better perception of reality. In addition, they also showed more acceptance of themselves and are more accepting of others. Overall, they are better people who are concerned with helping others, show less judgment, and are highly accomplished. Like all people, though, they also have bad days with bad behaviors. Using Maslow's theories, Kristen appears to have her most basic needs satisfied. She routinely can expect 3 meals a day with a home to come back to that provides her security and safety. She receives plenty of warm love from her friends and family and feels that she has a place in her community and society. In that regard, Kristen is able to focus on her growth needs to move towards self-actualization. She no longer relies on her environment as much and seeks approval from others as often because her needs have been met. She trusts that the environment around her is stable and full of love. Maslow would explain that Kristen appears to be more independent and relies on her inner nature and talents to guide her behavior. She no longer seeks to meet her parents' expectations. Instead, Kristen listens to herself to solve problems and showcase her abilities to the world. When I'm hungry, no matter how important the task may be, I still make time for a quick snack or meal because more and more of my attention would get devoted to the fact that I'm hungry and I would be unable to focus on anything else. This supports Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which says that my basic needs are the primary motivations for my behaviors until they are satisfied. Once these physiological needs have been met, I can resume whatever I was doing. On a day-to-day basis, however, I am fortunate to still live with my parents and have shelter, food, and love provided for me consistently and reliably. Most of my attention is rarely devoted to my basic needs. There was a time when the pandemic started and my mom and I weren't working that worried me. My dad was the only one earning money for our family of 4. I wasn't sure if we would be able to pay our bills, obtain food to the frenzied people stocking up, or the next steps if the lockdown persisted. This uncertainty definitely shook up what I knew and had taken for granted, likewise for most people. Luckily, the pandemic has not affected my family immensely, and my basic needs continued to be met during that period of lockdown and now as the pandemic continues. I will note, however, that during that time, a lot of my perspective on what is important to me has shifted. Family and friends were always important, but more so now than ever. Being able to spend and cherish that time among my people is something that I strive to do a lot more. After all, there are no real guarantees in life. With that being said, my goals have also changed somewhat. I knew that I always wanted to have a family and a career as a physician before. Though I'm pursuing those same goals, I'm placing a bigger emphasis on the work-life balance. I allow myself to take time off from work or studying to work out, hang out with friends, or read a book. I still want to be a physician since I think this is a career that allows me to showcase my abilities and talents. To become a doctor, I need perseverance and dedication. I just realized that the rest of my life didn't need to have to be on hold while I pursue that goal, and I can do both concurrently. In the future, I hope to be able to take care of others' health as a physician, but also dedicate time to the hobbies that I enjoy. Thus, I am still on the path working towards fulfilling my potentials and seeking personal growth to be the most that I can be and accomplish everything that I can, even though it looks slightly different. These are some of the things that can be understood about Kristen's personality using Maslow's humanistic approach. This has been Kristen's personality analyzed by the different schools of psychology with varying perspectives from many prominent psychologists who have shaped our understanding on personality. Using these theories helps us better understand our behaviors and extend that understanding to others. While each theory lacks a comprehensive explanation for our personality, each limitation is understandable because of our complexities and uniqueness. However, as shown throughout this project, what was missing in the Freudian analysis was examined by the behaviorists. What the behaviorists failed to consider was then up to the humanistic approach to add upon. This demonstrates how psychology is constantly aiming to innovate and fill in the missing gaps. Perhaps in the future, there will be new ideas that help tie in all of these threads. Until then, this is one of our best understandings of personality, especially Kristen's. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye!